Philanthropic.
Philanthropic.
Philharmonic.
Philharmonic. Is that like the Phillips and screwdriver?
Welcome to AT Banter, the podcast where we discuss anything and everything regarding the world of assistive technology. With our hosts, Steve Barkley, Rob Minot, and Ryan Fleury. Now, let's banter.
Hey, and welcome to AT Banter. My name is Rob Minot, and today I am joined by Steve Barkley.
Hello.
And Ryan Fleury.
Howdy.
And another very special guest.
Special guest star, Carrie Anton.
Woo!
Thank you. Good afternoon.
We should go into a little bit of our background with Carrie.
I think we should, yeah.
Oh, no, that's okay.
She's kind of near to our hearts.
Yeah, Carrie was a one-time Aroga employee, superstar, who ran off to join the circus. That circus is now known as Athabasca University. And Carrie specializes in universal design. Is that fair to say, Carrie?
It's very fair to say, yep. And accessibility, including like web accessibility as well. So
that dovetails awfully well into our show theme for this week, which is universal design.
You know, it's like we plan these things. One of these days, it's going to bite us in the butt because we're going to be talking about something completely different than what our guest knowledge base is.
Actually, we should probably mix that up. Carrie, today we're going to talk about V8.
V8? Like, I should have had a V8?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We're not going to talk about V8.
Before we dive into that, though, we should just mention a few things real quick. We should actually throw a shout out to Adam Wilton for last week's podcast.
Absolutely. Adam was a rock star and made us sound almost as if we knew what we were talking about.
He really did. And he was a great guest. He was a good guy.
Absolutely fabulous.
And he didn't even drink all our coffee.
I don't think he drank any of her coffee.
Exactly.
Yeah, even better.
Absolutely. Also, we had a webinar yesterday on the importance of Braille literacy, and the great gals from Braille Literacy Canada helped us with that. And so we'd like to throw a shout out to Natalie Martiniello and Jen Golden. It was a really, really good webinar.
Thanks, Natalie and Jen.
Thanks, guys.
I missed it. I'm very sad. Pouty face.
And anyone else got anything?
Yeah, I got a couple of things. I've talked to a few people about the podcast since we started doing it, and one question has come up over and over. The thing that is burned into people's brains is, who's this Rob Minot guy?
Who is Rob Minot?
Who is he?
God.
Who is Rob?
Wow, that is such an existential question.
It totally is.
Spell that.
Rob
Existential?
is the guy who can spell existential.
What do you do at Aroga, Rob? What's your purpose? Your raison d'etre?
God, that's such a loaded question. I guess I'm the shadowy figure in the background. I'm like the Bond supervillain.
Okay, we'll go with that.
No, Larry?
That's right. I was hoping for an underwater footage, but all I got was this stupid volcano layer. No, yeah, I guess I produce all the marketing materials. When I first started at Aroga, I think many, many years ago, I think they brought me on to actually revamp the website.
And the catalog.
Yeah, was it, and the catalog as well?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know it dumped into the catalog.
Even I remember that.
That's right. That's right. And then by the time I'd finished all that, it was time to start the next catalog. And then by the time I finished that, I think the website needed to be revamped again. And it's just
running around in circles.
It's a vicious circle.
Yeah. So I do a lot of the multimedia work here, and these days I'm helping put together this monstrosity. do some video editing around here, and just whatever needs to be done.
Excellent.
I do it.
Well, seeing as we went into greater detail on you, I think we should also go into greater detail on Carrie too.
Sure.
Because Carrie's just
What a friends for, right?
For example, did you know that Carrie was a fairly high-level Paralympic athlete?
I think she was a gold medal athlete, wasn't she?
She was a gold medal athlete, wasn't she? Was there something along that lines? Was there a gold medal in your past, Carrie?
There was a gold medal in my past. I played the sport of goalball on the national team for 8 years, and I played the sport for 20 years. And so lots of bumps and bruises, and I retired in 2005 from that sport, and I still coach today, and some of the athletes that I work with are on their way to the national team. So it's a pretty exciting extreme sport if no one has ever tried it. It's a 3-on-3 on a gym floor, and you whip a ball really fast, really hard at each other, trying to score in the goal behind the 3 of your teammates. And everyone's blindfolded, so it's a very equitable sport in that sense.
And the ball's weighted too, is it not?
It's about, I think, 3 kilograms. Yep, and it has bells in it that makes noise, and the floor is taped tactile so that you know where your zone is, where you're supposed to stay, so you don't collide with your teammates as you maneuver around the playing zone. Yeah, it's fantastic. There's over 100 countries that play it in the world, and to get to the Paralympic level, it's a lot of work. I mean, there's 8 women's teams that get to go and 12 men's teams, but it's a fantastic sport. I mean, as well as assistive technology and accessibility and universal design, I love adapted sports, and I try almost every one that's out there. Yeah.
Awesome.
So how's the arthritis?
It hurts. Yeah. My doctor finally said to me, you're almost, and you should really just slow down. And I looked at her and laughed. I was like, really? You're not supposed to say that out loud.
Okay, so shall we talk about our show theme for today?
Sure, let's dive into some of the stuff we got prepared.
Okay, so let's first off, let's go through this universal design. What is universal design, Rob?
Are you asking me? Shouldn't you be asking our guest?
Well,
You're asking me.
I don't want to put her on the spot or anything. Should I put you on the spot, Carrie? What is universal design?
Sure. Universal design is actually something that's come about. It was a movement in the early 60s, and it came about inspired by the civil rights movement. But universal design itself is the design of products and environments to be usable by everybody to the greatest extent possible without having adaptations or accommodations or special features put into it. So some of the common things that we experience now in universal design and physical access would be like curb cuts, right? A lot of us take advantage of those now. Cyclists, people pulling carriages, delivery people, as well as people in wheelchairs. And so that's an example of universal design where when you see a curb and you don't see a curb cut, then it's definitely hasn't been made in the past 20 years, right? So universal design is that environment that's been changed so that everybody can take advantage of the curb cut. Yeah.
So do you find that like some things just kind of end up as universal design, even though they weren't necessarily initially designed that way? One example I can think of is the vibrating ring on our cell phones, right? I mean, initially that was designed for deaf users, but it's certainly something that's entered the mainstream in terms of now everybody uses it, and it's a common design element.
Yeah, exactly. Most movements, like whether it's civil rights or universal design or accessibility in the digital age as well, there has to be that stage of awareness where people are like, oh, let's make vibrating keychains, or let's make vibrating sensors on cell phones or alarm clocks, or in captions, right? How many people are in a bar and they are reading the captions because the TV's volume is turned off, right? Everyone can take advantage of a lot of things, but there is an original awareness phase that is needed where people need to understand that it is a challenge specifically for people that have disabilities. But if we fix that environment, everyone's going to benefit.
All right.
Well, I was curious, like when you guys mentioned when we wanted to talk about the Convention of Human Rights and the Convention on Rights for Persons with Disabilities, and if the universal design movement happened in the 60s and the legislation came about in the 70s and 80s, I mean, and just now in 2008, we're starting to get things passed at the United Nations to say people with disabilities have a right to, proper spaces, education, information, technology, just like everyone else does. There's a huge gap there when it comes to equity, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's one of the things that I was surprised most about doing some of the research for today's show was that, and I know somebody specifically who has gone to New York to the UN to actually speak at the session for the rights of persons with disabilities, and I was shocked in doing the research that really, I mean, this thing's only been in existence for 10 years. Like it only came about in 2006, which it's a bit shocking when you think about it.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's taken that long for people to, in various countries, so we're talking not just developing countries, but to realize that there are barriers, right? There's more poverty with people with disabilities. There's more inequity as far as living conditions and education and employment, and so many things that maybe we in North America understand fairly well, but in other places they're just starting to realize that, oh, this is a problem, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We should maybe back up a little bit and just, because people who are sort of tuning in, they're not necessarily going to know what we're talking about. But this week in New York at the UN is the 9th session of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. And it's basically a convention that was adopted by the General Assembly in 2006. And it's intended as a human rights instrument with an explicit social development dimension, and adopts a broad categorization of persons with disabilities and reaffirms that all persons with all types of disabilities must enjoy all human rights and fundamental freedoms. So you mean like a lot of any of the UN human rights charters, this one is specifically geared towards people with disabilities, and specifically their mandate is to basically, eliminate poverty and inequality for people with disabilities all over the world. And it's a new idea.
It always alarms me how many different ways we have to say, hey, don't be a jerk to people.
Like even in April, 6 people, people who have albinism have disappeared and are most likely murdered or maimed.
Crazy the stuff that goes on. Is this in Africa?
That's in Malawi. Yeah, so there's still people are still having the right to live is being questioned in their countries. They're not even worried about internet access or anything like that, right? They just want to live, and even their family members or cousins or friends are also being persecuted as well. So the rights of people with disabilities is huge, and ensuring that they're equitable and that they're recognized.
Yeah, there's some really terrifying stories told by people with albinism from Africa, because in Africa, you may not be aware, witch doctors believe that body parts of albinos are magical and can be used in all sorts of folk remedies and tonics. So people with albinism are subject to kidnapping, having parts of their body chopped off. Somebody might randomly show up at their house, chop off an arm, and run away with it. Might not necessarily kill them outright, but oftentimes they are kidnapped and killed by these witch doctors. And there seems to be very little that the law can do about it or is willing to do about it. There is an excellent charity called Under the Same Sun that devotes itself to bringing about better awareness of albinism and trying to fight against these prevailing forces that are persecuting them. And it's definitely a charity you might want to look up. They do some great work. But being a person with albinism in Africa is a very, very frightening place to be.
And also some countries in South America as well. They're finding there's an island where people who have albinism are sort of exiled to places like, I don't want to mention any country names because it's also not all of Africa. There's really some countries in Africa like Malawi that are really prevalent in these activities against people with have albinism. But also South America as well. So
Terrifying.
Yeah, craziness.
It is, and I mean, it really just, it really makes you think that we have it really good over here, and you don't think of these issues in a third world country. I noticed that there's a lot of blindness products coming out of India, especially these days.
I think that's probably partly driven just because there's a huge population there that has been underserviced, and they do have a growing middle class now. So they're starting to economically have more heft, and they're starting to recognize the needs to address or the need to address the needs of people with disabilities.
And there's also increasing movements there for universal design as well, because they do have a lot of barriers that are imposed by poorly designed spaces, inflexible design of, information or buildings or workstations, and the increasing demographic that we're living longer now all across the board. I saw a graphic once that said that there's almost 51% of the population either has a disability or knows someone that has a disability or somehow influenced or impacted by someone with a disability. It's like 51% of the world's population. So that market is actually becoming a greater, it's having a greater influence in the economy.
Right, and at the same time, in the Western world, we're experiencing the aging of our baby boomer population, which is a massive section of the population, and as they get older, incidents of disability increase, and they expect their needs to be met as well.
Well, if you think about it in the terms of who is able-bodied and who is able-bodied 100% of the time, virtually nobody. Everybody at some point in their life has not been able-bodied, whether they've broken an arm, broken a leg,
throwing their back out, is a toddler, or is an 80-year-old. I mean, everybody goes through a point where they're not necessarily fully able-bodied. So universal design is going to benefit absolutely everybody and not just one small niche of the population.
Yeah, for sure. There's 7 principles, and you can sort of tell just by the description of the various principles of universal design how it could help. So they talk about like equitable use, flexibility in use, as well as simple and intuitive use, and perceivable. The information is perceivable, so it's somehow people can understand it via all 5 senses, or one of the 5 senses at least. Tolerance for error, so that's giving people assistance when they have an error or cannot get into a building, or there's some kind of a web error that comes up, and as well as low physical effort, or the least effort required to get from point A to point B, whether it's a space or whether it's a digital place. And the other one is size and space of approach and use. So we're always talking about converting and designing something so that anyone can use it and everyone can use it, and thinking outside the box.
Absolutely. I mean, another panel that I was reading about recently was a panel that was called Rethinking Ability, and it took place last month at the International Women's Forum, and they were discussing the policy in the U.S. and Israel and China, talking about basically universal design and how it's an attitude that needs to change at a certain level, where companies need to realize that if universal design is sort of plugged into a more profit-focused model, and they start developing, just sort of baking in universal design into products and selling them into the mainstream instead of having AT be something, a completely different arm.
A plug-in of some kind.
Yeah, AT's always been a bolt-on and been an afterthought, right? But big business wants to see the profitability of doing something like that. Even though it probably wouldn't take a lot of money, Samsung has included TTS in some TVs. There's talking microwaves. There's talking washers and dryers. Companies have tried it, but because I guess the public just doesn't either know about it or gravitate to it, they discontinue the product. And I think that needs to change.
Well, luckily, we got some big boys on our side. Certainly you can point to Apple and I guess Microsoft to some degree.
And Google.
And Google, of course. Sorry, Google. Didn't mean to leave you out. Yeah, I mean, their accessibility stuff that they've baked into the smartphones has really revolutionized things.
Yeah, and there's those things that do, like, we use them every day, like big grip measuring spoons or handles for peeling potatoes or scissors, or even something that as simple as left-handed products, right? In the 50s and 60s, if you were left-handed, you usually got a smack on your left hand and you had to start using your right hand and learn how to use it, right? Up until like the past few presidents of the United States, they're all left-handed, right? So then people start to see that it's okay to be left-handed and you're not going to get smacked over the wrist.
It's not okay.
I'm right-handed, so I'm kind of.
Find that you're aware.
But still, it's okay to be left-handed. So yeah, you're right. And there are even, washing machines like Kenmore and LG that actually that are on the regular market, and the universal design principles are built right into them with big yellow lights or easy control knobs. And we don't even think of that as universal design, right? But that totally helps people with low vision or people who just aren't seeing so good, or people who need to grasp a knob or push a button. Right? Yeah.
So, Carrie, would you say things are getting better in terms of universal design?
Definitely, I think they are. From the reasons that we've already mentioned about some of the technology that's including accessibility features into them, and some of the low tech or no tech that already has been designed with universal design in mind. Definitely it's getting better. And also with legislation, of course, in Australia, in the UK, in America, there's the what's it called, guys? The communication and blah, blah, blah one, where you cannot develop a product without having thought of accessibility beforehand. Developers have to be putting accessibility in things. So we can't give all the credit to to these guys for coming up on their own. They've actually been mandated to do it if they want their product to hit the mainstream shelves, right?
But who regulates that?
Like our CRTC, but it's whoever's in the U.S., whatever that.
There's a bunch of, just going through some of the stuff I've Googled here, there's a bunch of different acts that have been signed. There's one called the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, which was put into law. It says here it's placing significant new responsibilities on several cabinet-level agencies that have the responsibility for increasing the employment of individuals with disabilities, particularly the Department of Labor and the Department of Education. And it's designed to advance employment opportunities for individuals with disabilities. So good for you, America.
Yeah. So Canada's got a long ways to go, but more and more.
I'm hopeful, though. The fact that we have a minister who has a visual impairment in charge of, or who's been tasked with drafting a Canadians with Disabilities Act, I think is a very positive step forward, and I hope that the government follows through on this and gets it done within their first term in office here.
Is the goal of universal design to sort of basically eliminate assistive technology in terms of as a separate arm that exists?
Yeah, Carrie, are you trying to put us out of business? Is that what you're trying to do?
No, definitely not. This is one of the myths of universal design, is that there's never going to need to be accommodations. There's never going to need to be disability services. There's not going to need to be assistive technology, when really there is, because there are those instances of disability where for lack of a better word, intervention is required, and that intervention could be the assistive technology. It could be the accommodation of a space, right? A workspace or a workstation, or the technology that's involved. So there's never going to be a lack of need for assistive technology, and in fact, you'll find more and more people will be using things that we put into place as assistive technology, and the product category will be broadened to encompass more people and more features that will be more generally used. So it could actually, embrace the world, and the world could embrace assistive technology. Don't worry, guys. They're still going to have a job. Me too.
All right, that sounds good to me.
Carrie said so. Yeah.
And we're starting to see this universal design and accessibility creeping into places that you wouldn't necessarily expect it to. For example, a video game, Uncharted 4, came out last month, and the developer of that game, Naughty Dog, released a video that talked about the accessibility features that they built into the game and some of the story behind it.
Yeah, it's a good game. Have you played any of the Uncharted games?
I have watched my son play Uncharted on the console. I can't actually play console games. I'm a PC gamer. I'm used to gaming on a keyboard, and as soon as somebody hands me one of those controllers, I believe that what's the term my son used? I think it was, "Oh, gee, you suck, Dad."
Well, yeah, it's a pretty action-packed game. Like watching, because I played a little bit of it, and I suck at it too. But it's actually pretty amazing to watch this video, and we'll post a link to this video in the show notes because it's actually really interesting to watch. It's actually pretty amazing that what people can play through. With just slightly altered controls.
There's also a group I should mention called AbleGamers. They're an organization that does specific adaptations for people to allow them to participate in gaming. And that's another very, very cool cause. And they've done some really neat, different adaptations for people to get them involved in games and, having an outlet, a recreational outlet through video games. But
it is true. I mean, Naughty Dog's a AAA game studio. It's so again, they're leading the pack in terms of cooking in these accessibility features. And, when the big dogs do things like that, all the little dogs follow suit.
Let's hope it's a trend that carries forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Even things like in terms of the consoles themselves, I know that for years, people have been customizing their own, like Xbox 360, Xbox One, PS4 controllers to make them more accessible for their kids. And really, you watch some of the videos on YouTube, they're not that hard to do. And so it just makes you wonder that even the console manufacturers, there's some universal design that they could do on the hardware end to make video games more accessible.
Absolutely.
So it's not just software and just games. But I mean, something like video games that we all take for granted. I mean, I think it's a very good sign that we see universal design creeping into that as well. And really what it comes down to is that, and video game makers are very aware of this, is that demographics. If they make their games accessible, that's that many more people that are going to buy them.
Now, Ryan, you've had some experience with video games designed for people with blindness and visual impairments as well, haven't you?
Mm-hmm. Somewhat, yeah. Yeah, there's quite a number of games. I've sent Rob a link that maybe he can share in the show notes as well. But a lot of them are side scrollers. kind of single player games, except for the card games. There's a lot of card games where you can play against other people. But, there's some action-packed games out there. There's been some really good quality games that aren't available anymore, I don't believe. But there was one called GMA Tank Commander, which had realistic audio sounds. Another one called kind of loosely based on the Harry Potter series. But
Harry Potter?
Yeah. But again, GMA games. A lot of them are really well done. But I've just found myself not much of a game player at all. Even when I had sight, I didn't really play a lot of video games. I was too busy being outside doing stuff. So
You were a jock.
Jock that got beat up a lot. Yeah.
and now you just collect guitar after guitar after guitar.
That's right.
That's right.
I have a hobby.
Should we move on to this note about the founder of PowerMat wants to kill the keyboard?
Yeah, I thought this was just interesting. I don't know how much this plays in the universal design, but I just thought it was funny that this guy has gone from the PowerMat to this. I don't even know how to describe it. To tell you, did you watch this video?
I did, yeah. First off, we should probably say the company that's making this, the product called Tap Systems, but previously they designed the PowerMat, which is a wireless charging system for things like cell phones, which I think is used by a lot of different companies. I know I've got it in my Nexus 6 phone. I know Samsung has it in a lot of their phones. A lot of different phones have now adopted this wireless charging system. But now what they've done is they've got a foam strap that slips onto your hand, and it looks like brass knuckles, only it's foamy, and it'll translate 31 finger taps into letters and numbers, and these are transmitted by Bluetooth to mobile devices such as phones and tablets, supposedly with an accuracy level of 99%. And it's an alternative to a keyboard or voice recognition. And the video shows people typing very, very quickly
It does.
with this system. But to be quite honest, I don't think it'll ever take off.
That was my takeaway too. I was just like, who's gonna use this? I mean, you essentially have to learn to type again. In the video, I mean, it does claim that it takes 10 minutes to learn the system. Supposedly, it's supposedly very intuitive, but I don't know.
Yeah, it's the sort of thing you'd really kind of want to try out and see if a duffer like me can figure it out and use it consistently. But I think back to things like the Dvorak keyboard. The QWERTY keyboard, which is ubiquitous on virtually every electronic device these days. It was designed for mechanical machines with the aim in mind of slowing down input so that you wouldn't jam up the mechanical machine. So Dvorak comes along and says, well, I'm going to redesign the keyboard and I'm going to make it so it can be as efficient as possible, and redesign the keyboard, and adoption was pretty much nil. There were very, very few people who picked up the Dvorak keyboard and ran with it. I think in my entire life, I've only met one person who used a Dvorak keyboard.
Yeah.
Now, mind you, he could type like the wind, but it was definitely a good design. But I would expect this tap system to probably go down the same road. I think people are just very much used to the QWERTY keyboard.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, what's interesting about the article, too, is that he does mention the blind and the visually impaired and how it has a lot of potential in that market. I don't know. Do you see that?
It's entirely possible. I think people who are blind and visually impaired, input methods currently are either QWERTY keyboard, voice recognition, or potentially a Braille keyboard. If they can gain major efficiency through something that that they can learn quickly, I think there's an excellent chance they might give it a go.
Well, I think they said too with this PowerMat or this keyboard, it virtually turns any surface into a keyboard. right? So
Right.
you could be on your kitchen counter, you could be on the couch.
You tap it on your leg.
Tap on your leg.
Yeah.
You don't have to go looking for your keyboard. Right?
Well, and that's what I think is really neat for people who have physical challenges, right? Or stroke, or, they just have a hand movement, right? So they would be able to just tap anywhere. So I think it could have more applicable uses for people who have motor impairments. Yeah.
So this is a perfect example of something that is being developed for the mainstream, but it has all this AT stuff baked right in.
Mm-hmm.
Well, maybe we should get one of these and start playing with it.
We should.
I'm still in for an orbit braille.
Actually,
Pick me.
give me a power mat while you're at it.
I've got one on my desk.
Do you ever use it?
I use it all the time.
Oh, is that right? How does it work for you? Is it?
Fine. It doesn't charge my phone as quickly as if I am plugged directly into a wall plug. But I come into the office, I put my phone down on it, and it charges my phone all day. And when I leave the office, it's not drained.
I got it. Maybe I'll try one. I don't know. I've been leery about them because it's too. It's like magic.
I don't know.
It's too
Just
scary.
plug my phone in. Just as easy.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Just saying.
Give me the plug-in.
Whether you're plugging in your power mat or you're plugging in your phone, you're still plugging something in.
You're a geezer.
We just like accuracy. That's all.
Right.
Efficiency.
Okay, so let's talk about this next one, which is the Perkins School for the Blind, getting into apps and driverless cars.
Pick me again. Pick me.
You want that driverless car, don't you?
I do.
Yeah.
I'm going to start a movement. I'm going to do Twitter all over the place. Drive Carrie around.
I waited 45 minutes for a cab last Friday. I wanted a driverless car.
Yep.
I think that'd be that we could all carpool together.
Yep.
What if I don't want to give you a ride?
Ryan can drive. No.
I'm in Edmonton. It's a long way to go.
It's driverless. You just go to sleep and you wake up in Vancouver.
It's true.
You hope.
Yeah, loss of signal.
Yep. I was just going to say, you hope that your Google car is talking to the Toyota car, which is talking to the Ford car, and that there's no accidents along the way.
So every time you have no cell signal, that really worries me for that car, especially when you go over like Rogers Pass,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what you really have to worry about is Windows 10 deciding it's going to update in the middle of a freeway.
Oh, Rob.
Hey, trust me, that's Windows 10 has done that to me 3 times so far. I'm in the middle of something that's just decided, you know what, you need to update right now. So
Happened to one of my clients on Tuesday. Good.
should we go on? Do we go on a little bit of a Windows 10 rant for a minute?
Yeah, I haven't upgraded, so my ears are open.
Oh, don't worry, you're on their list.
Yeah, they're going to just make me do it.
Windows 10, I think, is an excellent example of universal design because there's things that people universally hate about it. And I drank, initially I was drinking the Windows 10 Kool-Aid. I was like, I will give them the benefit of the doubt. They know better. Not anymore. No, this is ridiculous at how they force these updates down our throats. And I'm not just talking about like the Windows 10 update itself. I'm talking about the way that the new Windows 10 actually does updates. I mean,
well, they actually put Windows 10 as a recommended update. So at some point in time, your computer restarts, and next thing you know, you're running Windows 10.
Yeah, well,
it's done the update in the background.
Well, and that's a huge problem, especially for our clients, right? The ones that are running software that is specifically tailored to only run on earlier versions of Windows. They get a Windows update fed to them, and now they have a useful piece of software that they have to update.
Yeah. Not necessarily, though. You can roll back to the previous version of Windows.
Yes, you have 30 days to roll back.
Yeah. Yeah, but then you've got to figure out how to do it. Which is a pain.
Well, and once the Windows 10 is installed, our remote access doesn't work. It's straight in the middle of the install. It's waiting for you to accept the user agreement. I ran into that on Tuesday.
Terrific.
Yeah.
So you pretty much have to have some sort of sighted assistance to get past that? Or?
She was able to tab to the cancel button to decline the user agreement, and then it restored itself back to her Windows 7. And then our remote access worked. But until that point, I had to try and get her to walk through tabbing and getting around to that decline button. So you probably could have done it with Narrator, but you still got to walk somebody through clicking that button.
Right.
Well, and like Rob was saying, we have clients who may be running earlier versions of a screen reader that they haven't updated to support the current version of the OSs. And if that's the case, if we can't get them rolled back, then, either A, the computer's going to have to come in and have us do it, or they will have to, get somebody sighted in to help them with that.
We were talking about Perkins School and getting the apps and driverless cars, and then
Yeah, now we're on Microsoft.
yeah.
Well, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah. So
It's your audio nightmare, my friend.
well, the Perkins School, which is a very well known school for the blind and the deafblind. They have an advisory board made up of app designers, venture capitalists, and financial services professionals, also innovation consultants. And they meet quarterly to explore things like, different technologies, such as beacon technology, for an example, to help people navigate around on indoor spaces. Outside, you can use GPS to navigate from place to place, but as soon as you get inside a building, of course, your GPS kicks out because you can't see the satellites anymore. And when you're in the building, there's not a lot of good pointers to tell you where to go. So beacon technology is something that is being developed more and more, and Perkins is looking at this technology. They're also looking at things like robots that could serve as personal aids for blind people, and of course, autonomous vehicles. And they're actually in talks with a technology company that is developing driverless cars, and they want to use the Perkins campus for testing.
Okay, first of all, robots for blind people
are awesome.
Bring
them on.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's just really cool.
Yeah, I have a Zumba who vacuums my floor.
Cool.
Yeah. They need to
Does it get
start
stuck in
working
the
on these
corner?
robots.
Yeah.
No, she booms. Well, I don't know if it's a she, but it booms around and booms into the floor. It doesn't even go down the stairs. It kind of goes, stop, and then backs up. It's very cool. So if that's where we're going, I mean, I don't need to talk to my robot that does my floors, but I think robots are a really cool way to go. And Toyota has done some really neat things with robots in the healthcare system and helping people and being that personal aid that you said, and that company, that companion. Yeah.
Well, as much as we joke about it, I mean, I did sort of put on the short list an article about that very thing, about whether or not robots could be assistive technology aids in the coming years. So it's definitely something that people are thinking about and actively working on.
Yeah, I think there's all kinds of possibilities for robotics when it comes to people with disabilities. There's you look at different adaptations that people do. I think of one example is a friend of mine who's in a wheelchair and he can't reach the ground. So if he drops something, he's got to go searching for something to pick it up with, some kind of grasper or something, either that or it just stays on the floor. If he had a robot, he might be able to have that robot pick it up and hand it to him. That'd be pretty darn handy for him.
Oh, this beacon technology, is this what they're talking about, though, when they're talking about the last 50 feet problem?
Well, I think, yeah, they're talking about, you're getting into the building and then you've got to travel 50 feet, but which 50 feet in what direction? That kind of problem.
So do you know anything about this beacon technology? Like what exactly, how does it work if it's not?
Well, there's been a lot of work over the years on beacon technology. I remember probably the first time I got involved with it was a system called the Marco that Telesensory Systems developed way back in the 90s. It was an infrared technology. You had an infrared receiver, and then you had a beacon that was up on the wall somewhere. And what was cool about it was because it was infrared, it was directional. So if you the infrared's picking up an audio stream. So you've got your little beacon up on the wall, you point your receiver at it, and it's going to play the audio that's being transmitted from that beacon. And the further away from it you point, the fainter that sound got, and the more directly at it you pointed, the more clear the sound got. So it was very good for homing in on the source of that beacon. Now, that beacon could convey all kinds of information to you. It could, if it was over a store, for example, it could tell you what the store was, what they sold, maybe what the specials are. If it was in a building, it could tell you, potentially what a room number was, maybe what the layout of the room is. If it's a washroom or a male or female washroom. To my mind, it had a lot of potential, but it never really got adopted. And when telesensory was eventually sold, it just sort of died on the vine. Now there's a lot of work being done with iBeacons from Apple, which use, I believe it's Bluetooth technology. I'm pretty sure it's Bluetooth technology to transmit. The downside that I could see of that technology is that it wouldn't be directional. You would have information as you were close to a beacon, but you wouldn't necessarily be able to locate the beacon, I don't believe. Now, I haven't spent a lot of time with it, so I could be wrong there.
Well, I think, too, that, Bluetooth is limited by range as well. And I don't think Apple's the only one working on the beacon technology, so is a mall going to settle on one type of beacon, or are we going to have multiple apps on our phones that are communicating with the iBeacons and the Google beacons and whatever other beacons are out there? It could get really confusing and quite noisy.
Yeah, there's lots of different companies out there that are selling their beacon. Like I was at CSUN last year, and there was a few companies out there that are trying to sell their products to various places. So that could be it, is that we're going to have to use a certain app so that a certain company's products are going to be seen, which would be quite noisy.
Yeah, and pretty counterproductive too, right? I mean, how do you know, moving from one space to another, which app you need to have open to receive the information, or even that there is a beacon there that you can get information from? There really should be a standard for beacon technology, and it should be a standard, I believe, that also factors in directionality. I think a beacon that's just broadcasting in a big circle that doesn't give you directional information is less useful than one that does give you directional information. An example I would give would be, oftentimes when they put audible crossing, what are they called?
Pedestrian signals.
Pedestrian signals, yeah. Audible pedestrian signals. Here in Vancouver, a lot of ours chirp. So you press a button, and when the walk sign comes on, it starts chirping at you. People complain about those because, in the middle of the night, their nearest crosswalk is chirping away and keeping them up at night. So they've been forced after certain hours to have these things disabled. So now you've got an audible crossing signal that's disabled, and whoever needs that thing at night doesn't have it. So if you had a beacon technology instead that was directional, you would be able to home in on the thing. There would be no audio that would play other than to the person who needed it. And because it was more than just a chirp, you would be able to say things like a description of the crossing. So you could say, okay, this crossing is approximately 100 feet wide. There's an island in the middle, and you have X number of seconds to cross.
Yeah, that would be great.
All right. Well, I'll just get on that then.
You wouldn't mind, yeah. Yep. They're already doing it with advertising, right? If you have a certain program or certain app running, like they're just beaming out to you, like, come, this special is available at this store. And then the person who's blind is like, where's that? Like, which store? So that's where there probably could be need for an app that actually gives you more feedback. Yeah.
Well, the other thing I found interesting on this article was that Perkins won a $750,000 grant in Google's charitable arm earlier this year to develop a mobile app that we use crowdsourced information to help guide blind people to specific spots. So that's kind of interesting to me that they're going with crowdsourcing.
Yeah, that can be good or bad. I guess there's the Wikipedia example out there, right? That anybody can go and edit a Wikipedia entry, but somebody has to moderate it.
Yeah, absolutely. I suppose, right? Because otherwise, you're going to get somebody who's going to be like, "Yeah, St. Andrew's Church. Yeah, here you go," and then you end up at Mugs and Jugs or something.
No. There's that it's done to this one.
No, I think that one should stay.
It's a real place.
Really?
Yeah,
even if it wasn't, I want to go. Like,
we saw root beer.
They had really good lunch specials there.
just speaking of root beer, I had a really gross root beer the other day.
Really?
Beer?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you know how I like beer and I like flavored beers. And so, anyway, root beer, it's called Muddy Boots or something like that. Yeah. It's kind of like Dad's root beer with a kick.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, don't do it.
Not so good, huh?
No, not so good. No. I just had to share.
Let that be a warning to you all.
Yes.
Don't drink root beer.
Or flavored beer at all.
No, apple beer is supposed to be good.
No. Just say no to flavored beer.
Well, the one time I had Guinness with grapefruit juice with Guinness in it. That was pretty good.
Actually, that sounds really good.
That's sacrilege.
Yeah, but it looks cool. Like it's all like green and slimy, like a vodka slime. And then it's got a Guinness sitting in the middle because it just stays on top.
Steve, have you ever had Car Bomb?
An Irish Car Bomb?
Yeah.
You betcha.
Yeah, is it very good?
Oh, yeah. Fabulous.
What's that?
Irish Car Bomb? That's Irish whiskey dropped into a Guinness.
Yeah, we did that in Toronto.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I didn't know that's what it was called. I felt it the next day.
I would imagine you felt it like 5 minutes later. All right. Well, so what do we want to? Anything we want to say to wrap up about universal design in general? Carrie, did you have any other thoughts about?
No, I think I've repeated myself over and over quite enough. Yeah, I'm good. I'm good.
Well, how do you like? I don't know. Are you pretty optimistic at this point? Do you feel like we're closer now than we've ever been before to?
Most definitely, I think that we're closer to achieving universal design, but probably very much so still in the awareness stages. And so I would expect that in the next 20 years, we're going to see a lot more universal design in the digital area as well as like in spaces and communications. Yeah.
Where do you see it needing to change? Like what kind of things need to change to really drive it forward?
I think that what needs to change is the consciousness of the general population that needs to change and understand. We're still very much in a medical model of life. What's your disability? What's your problem? Rather than where are you impacted? Oh, you have trouble reading? Wow, so do I, right? That kind of mentality, it's a shift, right? Into thinking about what the area is that's impacted rather than, oh, what's the disability and the symptom? So we're very much having to change into a social model of thinking about disability and what we design.
So do you have any ways or thoughts on how we can advocate for more universal design?
A big stick.
A big stick.
Definitely. Universal design is going to come about via legislation. That's what's happened in those countries that have, been really successful in implementing universal design for spaces and places. It's been through legislation, right? And in Canada, we do things right now primarily via litigation. And that's what I mean by also a big stick, is that the fear of making things accessible and usable by everyone seems to be a motivator because people don't want to put out hundreds of thousands of dollars in a settlement or in the after design, retrofit, which is more expensive than designing in the first place. And so we still haven't had enough cases, I think, legally to have Canada move towards legislation that is more serious, like an Americans with Disabilities Act. Yeah. Some provinces have had more success with that, like the Ontarians with Disabilities Act, the AODA, in mandating what needs to be done in the digital age and communication and customer service. But that's very unique. So that's why I think we're still quite a few years away from the rest of Canada getting on board with that. We're still in the process of awareness and letting people know how an environment is designed poorly.
Even something with the ODA Act, though, like, is there teeth behind that act?
In Ontario, there's teeth, yeah.
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 That's my concern. We launch a Canadians with Disabilities Act, and, what does that really mean? Does that mean that now we have more audible traffic lights? Does that mean, what does that encompass? And who's going to enforce that?
I was talking to a blind lawyer a couple of years back, and we were talking about the Americans with Disabilities Act, and I was saying how it was really cool that they had this act out there that had some teeth to it that people could really use to force people into making spaces more accessible. And he said something which I thought was kind of interesting. He said that Canada actually has human rights legislation that has more teeth to it than the ADA does. It's just that most people are either unaware of how it can work, or they are unwilling to use it as a tool to have their grievances met.
Yeah, I think that's probably true because it takes so long for that process to take effect. So, and you have to prove due hardship, right, to either the individual or the organization that's wronging a person, right? So it's a long process and it's quite arduous. And there's three different pieces of that. What is a due hardship? I just can't remember what they are right now. But I can say that we still are very much driven by those litigations, which is unfortunate because legislation won't come about until enough people have been sued, in my mind.
Right.
Because how else do you have a consciousness shift, right? Look at the environmentalists and the movement that they've been trying to do for years and years and years, right? The consciousness of that is probably only for folks in British Columbia and some pieces of Ontario, right? The real serious environmentalists, except for terrorists. They live in Alberta, yeah.
Litigiousness.
Yes. I think what Carrie was saying is that people got to sue.
Or change their mind. I saw a neat graphic that said, the on one end was the cost and the other end was your mind. And cost is high when you're just the beginning stages, at the design stages basically, but then the cost goes up as time goes on because you're not willing to change your mind because it costs too much to change your mind. So the question is, at what point are you going to change your mind about universal design? Does that make any sense at all?
It really does.
Mm-hmm.
You get the graphic?
I do.
You missed my swooping motion of my arms.
This is a audio only podcast.
For now. We want to talk to you about our budget.
We have faces built for radio.
That is true.
Wow. I'm feeling some undue hardship.
That is true.
Well, that comes back to the cost of accommodation, right? To fix your mug. Cool.
Been there, done that. The second time round.
A $6 million man. We can rebuild him, make him better looking than he was before.
All right. So anyone else have anything? Should we shut the lady down for the night?
Yeah, I guess we can. It's 5 o'clock in Alberta, so Carrie would probably like to go home and.
No, I have a 6:30, so I'm good.
Oh.
I guess I shouldn't go have a beer and then go to my 6:30. Man, it's a busy week, huh?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Well, we'd of course love to thank Carrie for joining us today.
Thank you, Carrie.
Thanks, Carrie.
Thanks for having me, guys. It's been fun.
Absolutely. I'm sure we'll have you on again.
Can we talk about cars again?
No, I think we'll talk about sports.
Yeah, I was thinking we could get you and maybe Mike Lonergan from BC Blind Sports out here. Mike would probably come out and hang out with us.
Probably.
Yeah.
So what will we talk about?
How about sports?
Come on.
Hey, Rio de Janeiro Paralympic Games are coming up in September.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Lots of
Are we going to do a podcast about comic book movies then after that?
No. Well, Daredevil. We can talk about Daredevil. Sure.
Well, if we're going to talk sports, we have to have equal footing on the other side, right?
But how many disabled superheroes are there?
one.
Couple.
Daredevil.
Yeah, Daredevil.
Daredevil.
Thank you.
Yeah, I said that. That's one.
Well,
There's more. There's more. I'm just drawing a blank. There are more. Hang on.
I mean, it depends on how you Rogue. I mean, she sucks people's memories and powers out of them.
We got
I mean,
two
that's kind of
comic
a
book superhero
disability.
geeks in the room, and they can't come up with one.
Disabled superheroes. Okay.
Oh, that's right, Thor.
Thor.
Yeah, Thor.
How's he
Thor's-
disabled?
Because Thor's alter ego was Donald Blake, and he has to use a cane.
Get out.
Yeah,
Really?
totally.
All right. Dr. Midnight. Dr. Midnight, though he had to renounce, let's see here. He was blinded by a hand grenade explosion, the work of organized crime. Though he had to renounce the surgery, he could see in pitch darkness for some reason. So he became a crime fighter. As well as having an advantage at night, he wears special pitch black goggles so he can see during the day. So he's apparently a echolocator who can see at night
It's interesting.
or something. Captain Marvel Jr.
I don't think I've heard of this one.
And it says, well, sort of. Elvis Presley's
sort of.
favorite childhood hero was in reality Freddie Freeman, a newsboy who was crippled and in fact by the dastardly Captain Nazi. Oh, friggin' Nazis.
Classic.
Well, we can do a superhero themed show.
All right, thank you.
Given him his powers by a wizard. Actually, I know some people who are just totally into their comics, and I bet we could get them in here for disabled
See,
superheroes.
then there you go. There's Daredevil.
Thor, yeah. Dr. Donald Blake, GP, who can only walk with the aid of a cane. There's Daredevil as well. The Chief.
Oh, of course.
Oh, yeah, Dr. Charles Xavier. Of course, he's in a wheelchair.
Hello.
Yeah, you can see.
Yeah, that's universal design at work. You guys just totally didn't even see that he had a disability.
Exactly.
Yeah, Barbara Gordon,
Of course.
What was her issue?
She had her back broken.
What?
She was formerly Batgirl. She
She broke her back?
Yeah, she was shot by the Joker in the comic Batman the Killing Joke,
That's right.
Wow.
which happens to be probably my single favorite Batman comic. And they're making it into a movie. You know,
I know. I'm really excited about
yeah,
that.
it's a animated movie, I believe. But,
And the geeks have arrived.
but it's going to be
Yeah.
it's going to be an R-rated animated movie.
It's going to be awesome. I've
It's
seen the
gonna
trailer
be
for it.
fantastic.
Iron Man.
Iron Man. Oh yeah, because his heart. He was wounded in the Vietnam War, and he had to design an iron chest plate to sustain his weak heart. Of course, in the movies later, he was wounded in a cave in Afghanistan, but that's just revisionism. Echo, a Native American heroine created in 1999 as one of Daredevil's foes, though later an ally. Echo is thought to be mentally disabled as a child and was sent to a special school. But when she was able to replicate an entire song on a piano, she was moved to a school for the gifted. Turns out she was autistic. Go figure.
She can play piano, so they moved her to a special school.
Apparently.
Wow.
Yeah. And Komodo, the lizard, a Spider-Man villain,
Oh, of course.
was really Dr. Kurt Connors, a one-armed scientist who was hoping that he could regenerate his arm like reptiles do by injecting himself with a lizard serum.
Ew.
This gave him an arm, but also turned him into a human lizard, taking away his mind.
This will definitely be a show for Rob and Steve.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, totally. Disabled superheroes. I like
It's
it.
happening.
Do it the first week of July because I'm away.
Alrighty.
Fine.
Excellent.
All right. Well, I think we've taken up enough of time from the internet in general.
Good. It's been a blast, boys.
All right, and that's going to wrap it up for us. Thanks again for tuning in. and listening to us. Thanks again, everybody who's listening. Just a reminder, the website is www.atbanter. No, yes, it is. I gotta practice. Oh, you can tell it's late in the day. Okay.
All right, thanks. That's a wrap, folks.
Bye.
Remember,
drive safe. Don't forget to tip your waitress.
All right, it's official. Rob and Ryan have lost their minds, so the wrap now falls in my lap. So, thanks everybody for joining. Remember, you can visit us idiots at www.atbanter.com. You can also visit the Aroga website at www.aroga.com. You can also call us anywhere in North America on 1-800-561-6222.
The email address is atbanterpodcast@gmail.com.
Well, there you go.
Bye, everybody.
This podcast has been brought to you by Aroga Technologies. Visit Aroga Technologies online at www.aroga.com. That's AROGA.com. Music provided by bensound.com.